Good afternoon. The Information Policy Census and National Archives Subcommittee on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee will now come to order. Without objection, the chair and ranking minority member will have 5 minutes to make opening statements, followed by opening statements not to exceed 3 minutes by any other member who seeks recognition. And without objection, members and witnesses may have 5 legislative days to submit a written statement or extraneous materials for the record. Welcome to today's hearing, a review of agency use under the Federal Records Act of Web 2.0 technologies. As a result of today's hearing, we will have an understanding of what is meant by Web 2.0 in the federal government, recognize the federal records management implications of these technologies, and appreciate what areas of Web 2.0 may merit further examination by the committee. To that end, we have invited 3 government witnesses who are experts in these fields, including the Archivists of the United States. It is good to see you again, Archivist Ferriero. Web 2.0 technologies make possible interactive collaboration and enhanced information sharing, allowing large groups of users to participate in content creation. Federal agencies have embraced Web 2.0 for both external and internal applications to promote transparency, collaboration, and participation. Agencies must continue to manage content created via Web 2.0 applications under the Federal Records Act and in compliance with the National Archives and Records Administration guidance, which is why I have invited the archivists to testify today. The GSA is leading executive branch efforts to identify and develop Web 2.0 platforms for agencies to use. Therefore, we will hear today from the Associate Administrator of GSA's Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technologies. Several months ago, I requested the GAO review the management and protection of information collected and maintained by commercial providers of federal social media services. While they have only just begun that engagement, I have invited GAO's Director of Information Security Issues here today. It is my hope that during today's hearing, part 1 in a series of hearings of Web 2.0, we can remain focused on the subject at hand and not become distracted by issues outside of the scope of this hearing and even outside of the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. There have been media reports that this hearing will be used for a showdown with the administration over issues unrelated to the federal records implications of Web 2.0, indeed unrelated to Web 2.0 completely. If true, this is troubling. A congressional oversight hearing should be where important issues are thoroughly examined and not a showdown. Also, Rule 15 of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform expressly requires that all questions put to witnesses before the committee shall be relevant to the subject matter before the committee for consideration. I want to make sure that we use this committee's valuable time and resources appropriately. This Congress has been very active in oversight of federal as well as presidential records. I am an original co-sponsor of the first bill passed by the House in this session, H.R. 35, the Presidential Records Act Amendments of 2009. Not every member of the subcommittee voted for this important bill, and I continue to hope that the Senate will move forward and pass this legislation. If there is specific, creditable evidence that any federal agency is not properly managing federal records, we will examine that, and I am always open to suggestions from all members of this committee for relevant topics for future hearings. But it is more important to talk about the subject at hand an issue that affects all agencies in broad and diverse ways than to spend valuable subcommittee time making political points on a very different issue.
Will come to order.
In any case, this hearing is about Web 2.0 and particularly the federal records implications of these technologies. And I hope that everyone understands that and will confine their question to the subject matter of this hearing. As a final point, I want to clear up some confusion about today's hearing. There's continuing controversy about an old story. That is, whether an administration official used his personal email account in violation of the Presidential Records Act. First, the official, Mr. McLaughlin, is employed by the White House of Science and Technology Policy. While this is an entity in the executive office of the President, that office is not subject to the Presidential Records Act. The Office of Science and Technology Policy is subject to the Federal Records Act. In addition, his incidental use of a personal email account for government business is not and of itself a violation of the Federal Records Act, which governs his records. The individual simply needs to make sure that the record gets into the proper record-keeping system. And that's what happened. In fact, the issue that the White House examined, dealt with, and closed was not about any records statutes. It was about incidental contact with the official's former employer prohibited not by law, but by an ethics pledge. The White House dealt with the matter, and it is now closed. And now we shall move forward to the subject of today's hearing. I now yield to my colleague, the subcommittee ranking minority member, Mr. McHenry of North Carolina, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, before I make an opening statement, I'd like to record some of my concerns about this hearing. There was a hearing, this hearing was originally scheduled for June 24th, and among the witnesses that were invited to the June 24th hearing was Ms. Beth Simone Novick, the Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. So the fact that the chairman is saying that it's not, that we don't have oversight over that, it's perplexing to me that he had this very witness on the previous hearing that was canceled. So in advance of the originally scheduled hearing, Ranking Member Issa spoke publicly of his intention to question Ms. Novick about the use of personal email to conduct official business in the Office of Science and Technology. Ms. Novick chairs an office with Andrew McLaughlin, a former Google lobbyist the chairman references in his opening statement, turned administration official who used his personal email account to communicate with more than 25 Google employees, including influential lobbyists and lawyers. Mr. McLaughlin also used his Gmail address, his webmail address, to communicate with senior members of the Obama administration. This use of personal email violates the President's ethics pledge and federal law. And I do think those two together, separately and together, are very important things. Federal ethics pledge from the President, as well as federal law. And yet the White House refuses to answer questions from Republican members of this committee about how the problem is fixed. Interestingly enough, this witness was dropped before today's hearing in anticipation of this line of questioning. Within days of Ranking Member Issa's public statements about his intentions to question Ms. Novick about this incident, the hearing was canceled. Today, we're holding this hearing without a White House witness. Without being able to ask questions to a White House witness, our members are being deprived of answers about a very disturbing trend in the administration. On top of Mr. McLaughlin's use of his personal email to circumvent the Presidential Records Act and even the Federal Records Act, the New York Times reported on June 24th that White House staffers regularly meet with lobbyists at a Caribou Coffee across the street from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Because the discussions are not taking place at the White House, they're not subject to disclosure on the visitor's log that the White House releases as part of its pledge to be the most, quote, the most transparent presidential administration in history. It's important for this subcommittee's purposes that we're provided the opportunity to question relevant witnesses and to conduct proper oversight of, on our concerns related to the extraordinary lengths the White House staffers are going to avoid having their communications captured by the Presidential Records Act and the Federal Records Act. Not having a White House witness present to testify at this hearing undermines the purposes of this hearing and prevents us from doing our job of conducting oversight of this issue. So, under House Rule 11, Clause 2K sets forth hearing procedures to be followed by the House committee and subcommittees. Clause 2KS of House Rule 11 states that, quote, the chair shall receive and the subcommittee shall dispose of requests to subpoena additional witnesses. Pursuant to that rule, Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee authorize and issue a subpoena to compel the testimony of Miss Beth Simone Novick or another White House official with the Office of Science and Technology Policy qualified to testify on her behalf. Mr. Chairman, there's a motion.
Address the motion at another time.
Mr. Chairman, I demand a recorded vote. Ask for a recorded vote on this motion
We will
at this time.
at this time. Well, we will recess. Committee stands in recess.
Okay, so we're happy to wait.
The committee will reconvene, and I'll let the ranking member restate the motion.
Sure. House Rule 11, Clause 2K sets forth hearing procedures to be followed by the House committees and subcommittees. Clause 2K6 of House Rule 11 states that the chair shall receive and the committee shall dispose of requests by subpoena to subpoena additional witnesses. Pursuant to that rule, I move that the committee authorize and issue a subpoena to compel the testimony of Ms. Beth Simone Novick or another White House official with the Office of Science and Technology Policy qualified to testify on her behalf.
The members of the committee have heard the motion, and to
And with that, I ask for a recorded vote.
and a recorded vote has been requested. Will the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Clay?
No.
Mr. Clay votes no. Ms. Maloney? No. Ms. Maloney votes no. Mr. excuse me. Mr. Quayle? Ms. Sue? Mr. Kenny? Mr. McKinney?
Yes.
Mr. McKinley votes yes. Mr. Westmoreland?
Yes.
Mr. Westmoreland votes yes. Mr. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Michael votes yes. Mr. Chapin?
Yes.
Mr. Chapin votes yes.
Will report.
Mr. Chairman, the noes are 5, the ayes are 4, the noes have it.
And
Motion is defeated.
Mr. Chairman, with that, because this is obviously a hearing that doesn't get to the essence of this question, and seeing as it's apparent that, you know, the majority in the Congress is very intent on protecting the White House from these questions, I move that we adjourn.
The motion to adjourn is before the committee. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Clay?
No.
Mr. Clay votes no. Ms. Maloney? No. Ms. Maloney votes no. Ms. Maloney votes no. Mr. Davis? Mr. Davis votes no. Mr. Driehaus? Mr. Driehaus votes no. Mr. McKinney?
Yes.
Mr. McKinley votes aye. Mr. Westmoreland?
Aye.
Mr. Westmoreland votes aye. Mr. Michael?
Aye.
Mr. Michael votes aye. Mr. Chapin?
Aye.
Mr. Chapin votes aye. Mr. Clay, the noes are 5, the ayes are 4.
By a vote of 4 to 5, the motion is defeated.
Well, Mr. Chairman, after stating the obvious that you have the majority and you want to proceed with this hearing, I just ask why it is that you chose to not invite Ms. Novick when she was previously on the last hearing. It was exactly the same. The only difference was ICE's statement. She was going to ask about.
Chairman, this matter has been settled by vote.
I'm
The member
inquiry the
continues
chair.
the member continues to support a matter that has been settled by a vote, a majority vote of the committee. He is out of order.
Mr. Chairman,
The gentlewoman.
question of the chair.
No, the gentlewoman is correct, and we will proceed with the hearing.
So the gentleman will not ask a question.
I will not answer the
Okay.
question.
Then I demand my opening statement. I demand my opening statement as the ranking member. I made a motion, which was my initial statement. That was my motion, and I demand my opening statement.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes. Put
Thank
him
you.
on the clock.
This could be a very open hearing about the important part of the new technology that the nation is experiencing, and certainly this White House and the government is experiencing as well. With the original hearing that we were going to have on the 24th, it was clear that we're going to have that discussion. And with new technology, the White House is not immune to this. The Bush White House used the same outlines of rules that the Clinton administration developed on retaining email. Who is entitled to a government email address, who is entitled to have a political or outside email address, the limitations on that. And it is apparent with all sorts of news that we're reading about this White House is that they're using technology that was not available during the Clinton era, was not even available when the Bush administration set forward their rules and regs on who's entitled to email access that is not official and governmental and therefore subject to records keeping. So I think it's important that we have this discussion with the White House. It's apparent that the majority in this Congress does not want to ask even a White House witness to be a part of it. In fact, they're trying to protect one White House witness from even answering questions about their record keeping. Even though we've seen in press reports that they're clearly doing things that are not in keeping with presidential records and federal records laws, before you even mention the president's ethics pledge. And, you know, it's a shame that it had to come to this, that we have to have a vote on it, but it's the intent of the chairman and this subcommittee members to do this. And so, you know, I beg your apology, the crowd here, the witnesses, our panel here, but unfortunately, this could have been a much better hearing with a much better exchange rather than having to vote on subpoena a White House witness because the chairman didn't invite that person to this hearing. And that's before you even talk about the violation of the rules that the majority displayed when you talk about the discussion of what is permissible. I was in a hearing with archivists and a similar panel a couple weeks ago, and the chairman refused to let me ask a question that he didn't deem in keeping with the subject matter of the day. Well, the subject matter of the day is deemed by a majority memo. Under House rules, you have to get a memo 3 days in advance. We got our memo at 5 p.m. yesterday. So if my questions aren't in keeping with what you deem correct, I'm going to ask you to have a vote to disallow my questioning, because I can't determine, and my staff can't determine, and the minority staff can't determine what questions to ask when you won't even tell us what the hearing's about. And this is very frustrating. And so that's the reason why we had to have these votes today, because we could have a substantive hearing about important issues when we're talking about presidential records. Every president does the same thing. They want to make sure that they have two lines of communication, one that's subject to the history books and the other that's not. And every president's done this. Every president. It's not a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. And we have to make sure that we use the power of oversight to make sure they adhere to those rules and regulations. And we have outside groups that are very interested in this as well. Some that are not traditionally conservative, some that are liberal, and some that are all across the board. So I think it's important that we have that oversight authority to make sure that we're getting an administration adhering to their ethics pledge and the laws of this land. Mr. Chaffetz, would you like the remainder of my time? And with that, I'd be happy to yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Are there any other opening statements? If not, for the record, this is a hearing on the Federal Records Act and not the Presidential Records Act. And with that, if there are no additional statements, the subcommittee will now receive testimony from the witnesses before us today. I'd like to introduce our panel. Our first witness will be the Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero. Mr. Ferriero has led the National Archives since its confirmation last November. He previously served as the Andrew W. Mellon Director of the New York Public Libraries, the largest system in the U.S. Mr. Ferriero earned bachelor's and master's degrees in English literature from Northeastern University in Boston and a master's degree from Simmons College of Library Information Science, also in Boston. After the archivist, we will hear from Dr. David McClure, the Associate Administrator of the Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technologies in the GSA. Dr. McClure received his bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Texas and a doctorate in public policy from the University of North Texas. Our third witness will be Mr. Gregory Wilhusen, Director of Information Security Issues at the Government Accountability Office. He is a certified public accountant, certified internal auditor, and certified information systems auditor. Mr. Wilhusen holds a BS degree from the University of Missouri and an MS degree from George Washington University. The final witness will be Mr. John Simpson. He is a stem cell project director for Consumer Watchdog, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that advocates for taxpayers and consumer interests. Mr. Simpson holds a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York in Binghamton and a master's degree from the University of Southern California. I thank all of our witnesses for appearing today and look forward to their testimony. It is the policy of this committee to swear in all witnesses. I'd like to ask you to stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect the witness's answer in the affirmative. We will begin under the 5-minute rule with Mr. Ferriero. Please, you may begin.
Chairman Clay, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the subcommittee, thanks for the opportunity to testify today. This hearing is exploring the use of Web 2.0 technologies by federal agencies. I'm here to state that the content created within these applications, in many cases, should be treated as official federal records. In my written testimony, I described the guidance NARA has issued and is continuing to issue to agencies about how to identify and manage content created using Web 2.0 technologies. Additionally, I've outlined the Web 2.0 initiatives that we have undertaken at NARA to promote transparency, collaboration, and participation, and the steps we're taking to manage our own records from these Web 2.0 projects. NARA has long recognized that content created by federal agencies and placed on their website